Hi everyone, and welcome to Speed Week. I'm Larry Newber.
And I'm Bob Jenkins. Daytona International Speedway is silent again after a hectic two-week period. We begin our review of last week's activity with a look at the qualifying races. The first of two 125-mile qualifying races belonged to Bill Elliott in the Coors Ford Thunderbird. The driver who qualified for the Daytona 500 at a speed in excess of 205 miles an hour ran away from the rest of the field at the start. And when the checkered flag came out, his margin of victory was nearly a full lap ahead of second place Darrell Waltrip. The second qualifying race was more competitive, with Cale Yarborough having his hands full with David Pearson. It stayed close thanks to a couple of caution flags, one of which came out when 5 cars got together in turn 4. None of the drivers was injured. On the last lap of the race, Yarborough used the patented slingshot to get by Pearson and win the event. Now here's Larry with a report on the Daytona Dash and consolation races.
The Comfort Coach 200 for the Darlington Dash Series was, for the most part, a 4-car race. That is until 14 laps from the finish, when Charlie Ogle and Ken Ullman got together in turn 4. They slid across the apron of the track and into the inside retaining wall. Neither was injured, but both out of the race. The 2-car battle between Mike Waltrip and Mike Swain continued for a few more laps until Waltrip, while leading, blew the engine in his car, giving Swain his second straight Comfort Coach 200 win in a row. Following that race, the drivers who didn't make the Daytona 500 field competed in the consolation race. Randy LaJoie picked up a win and the check for $3,500. Saturday sportsman race filled with Grand Nationals. Ron Kendrick reports.
The field for the Goodies 300 for NASCAR's Sportsman Division also included more than a half-dozen Grand National drivers. Dale Earnhardt broke to the early lead, but pole sitter Rusty Wallace charged right back to the front. He and 4 other drivers hooked up in a draft and were pulling away from the field when caution came out on lap 16. Davey Allison, Charlie Luck, Joe Ruttman, and Rick Mast tangled in turn 4. They spun toward the inside wall but never made contact. A round of pit stops kept the field bunched tightly together. Speaking of pit stops, Kenny Burke made one. He just forgot to leave the gas can on pit road when he left. He came in 2 laps later to correct the problem. Wallace, Jeff Bodine, Bobby Allison, and Ron Bouchard swapped the lead back and forth for the next 20 laps or so, and were pulling away from the rest of the field when caution again came out, this time for a spin by Sammy Swindell in turn 2. On the restart, Wallace and L.D. Ottinger hooked up together, but their duel was short-lived. A couple of laps later, the third caution of the day came out when Swindell, Alan Kulwicki, and Mike McLaughlin got together in turn 4. No one was injured in the crash. There was one more caution flag in the race. That came on lap 83 when early race leader Ron Bouchard blew an engine in turn 3 and spun up the banking. The rest of the race was run under green, and that set up a last lap shootout by Wallace, Bodine, Allison, and Waltrip. Bodine made the move on the backstretch and was able to hold on to win the race. Allison finished second, third was Waltrip, fourth was Wallace, and fifth was Morgan Shepherd. Bodine picked up nearly $33,000 for the win. Ron Kendrick reporting for ESPN SpeedWeek at the Daytona International Speedway.
Everybody predicted Bill Elliott for Sunday's Daytona 500, and when it was over, well, they were all seeing red. That's the red of Bill Elliott. When the green dropped, we all got an idea of just how strong he still was. First leader with Cale's Ford breezing along behind. And at least initially, the General Motor of Benny Parsons trying to keep up. Except for the red, what else, haired Elliott, it was like old times early. Behind Cale, David Pearson and Buddy Baker drafting for third, and King Richard drafting along for fifth. Average speed for the first 10 laps, almost 200. This is not typically exciting Daytona action. Less than halfway. All of a sudden, the Chicago Fire of burned pistons. First, Elliott's only real rival, Yarborough. Then, like a house of cards, Benny Parsons, A.J. Foyt, the surprising David Pearson, and the always fast Harry Gant. Even the champ, Terry Labonte. Richard Petty, this ether fire, then shifting woes. By halfway, Baker is the only former winner left. More record speeds, not even a yellow. Greg Sachs kicks up a cloud of dust in one of Cale's old cars, but no contact. Oh, there were some minor incidents. A trimmer, Tim Richmond, slimmed his Pontiac along the outside of 2, and Dick Brooks tried to upstage Richmond at the same place. After the pit pauses, Bonnet and Waltrip have finally found a way to catch Elliott. That yellow flag, he's not leading. That's the first time that has happened in about 2 hours. See what we mean about seeing red? That lone white car is the amazing Lake Speed. Now just 10 laps to go. Number 9's only real challenger loses a motor, but Neal does a masterful job staying out of serious trouble. No mad last lap scramble today. Bill is simply too fast.
Cale ran a heck of a race. I know I felt like he was going to be another car to beat. You know, we started off there and he took off, and I let him set the pace, and You know, I run along there, and those times I was running as hard as I could run, and he was leading the race.
The remaining top 10 in the richest of all stock car races, Lake Speed second, Waltrip third, Baker fourth, Ricky Rudd fifth, followed by Sachs, Jeff Bodine, Rusty Wallace, Bobby Hillen Jr., and Bonnet.
The first IROC race of the year, also at Daytona, was won by Darrell Waltrip. An accident in turn 4 on the last lap saw Tom Sneva cross the finish line backwards in second. A.J. Foyt finished third and won the most money because he led the most laps. Derek Bell was fourth, and Harry Gant was fifth. The short tracks around the Tampa, Florida area last week. A scheduled 3-day Outlaw Midget Series at East Bay Speedway turned out to be a one-day affair, and the feature, which permitted both winged and unwinged machines, was won by Pennsylvanian Johnny Heidenreich in the winged yellow number 1. Rich Vogler had his hands full with Dan Borse in the battle for second, but Vogler moved his red 1S past Borse and took the position. The first race in the WWAR Midget Winter Nationals was held at Sunshine Speedway in St. Petersburg. Over 30 cars showed up here, and Nick Fedoro Jr. in the blue number 81 set fast time and easily won the feature. Borse was second. The next night, the two switched their finishing positions, with Borse winning and Fedoro second. The series then moved to DeSoto Speedway in Bradenton last Sunday night, and Nick Fedoro Jr. won again. Second was Mike Fedorchak, and Rich Vogler finished third.
If you're under 30, you may not remember that IMCA, once of Des Moines, Iowa, produced some of this country's legendary drivers, both sprint cars and stock cars. In the historic photo coming up, the leader is Tom Bigelow.
That was due mostly to the fact that the local fair boards were running their own local cars rather than a traveling band of IMCA stock cars or sprint cars. The IMCA Modified was developed in 1979, was the first year it ran. This year we will be running at about 27 tracks from Texas to Minnesota on a weekly basis.
In this race, the yellow number 01, Bobby Lane of Kansas City, was flagged the winner. But IMCA now has a claim rule on motors, and Bobby wouldn't sell. The white 98 of Bruce Hanford was declared the winner and leads in points. They may not be Ernie Durs, Bobby Grimms, or Pete Fulses, but someday, you never know.
The same Tom Bigelow spent 9 days in a Tampa, Florida hospital after a terrifying crash in a Champ dirt car race. Before he was released, I talked to him and asked him what he remembered about the flip.
We just started to pass this lapped car, and he just pulled right down into me and just started flipping. I knew when I got in the air and it started down that I was going to be in trouble.
But aside from the start, you don't remember much until when? You got here to the hospital?
Well, just kind of spotty things from the time that the crash ended. Nick Fernaro, I remember him coming up and helping get the helmet off. Then I remember my wife in the ambulance just for a second. And then things kind of went blank again until I got down the road a ways, and then one of the interns started talking to me, and it's just kind of comes and goes.
Tom is expected to be out of racing until a USAC sprint show at Eldora in late March.
Well, next on Speed Week, we'll visit with a successful Trans Am owner and builder.
And then a look at one of his drivers who is hoping to make history at Indianapolis. Stay with 1 week extension by NASCAR until March 4th to solve ownership problems. 3 tracks, Milwaukee, Indianapolis Raceway Park, and Watkins Glen, would like to have one of the Nashville dates if problems can't be resolved. A $650,000 repaving job is progressing at Sears Point International Raceway. The entire 2.52-mile, 12-turn circuit is being resurfaced. Work began in early February and will be completed soon.
A couple of Indy drivers, Tom Sneva and Roberto Guerrero, will drive Mazda RX-7s in the Mazda Inter-America Championship this weekend in Miami. The Ford Mustang Probe GTP car will not debut this weekend at the Grand Prix.
Price Cobb, a former Super V and Formula Atlantic star, will team with Jim Crawford in this year's Can-Am Series. Indy driver Derek Daly is said to be involved in a Can-Am team that will run V6 cars called Dolphins. And Bruce Jenner has bought one of the Huffaker Trans Am cars and plans on running the entire series.
SCCA's Trans Am Series was dominated last year by the Roush Protofab-built Caprice. They won 11 of the 16 races, including the champion Tom Gloy. Jack Roush's own team often races against cars that he has built. We ask him how he feels about that.
Well, the thing that we're doing here is not first and foremost operating race cars. You know, what we have here is is a situation that is total service to the racing community. We mean to build and sell engines and to build and sell cars that can showcase Ford products in the best possible light.
As a race car manufacturer, tell us, what would a turnkey or complete car cost?
Well, we've sold cars in the last 3 months, both as used cars and new cars. A used car with a new engine, used transmission and exhaust system runs just over $70,000. A brand new car with engine and exhaust system and transmission would be $90,000. The car itself as a package, as a new car package, is $63,000 minus the engine, transmission, and exhaust system. But the used cars in the same configuration we've sold for $50,000.
In '85, the Roush Motorcraft sponsored team will pursue the Trans Am Championship and possibly a two-car IMSA team if sponsorship can be found. With a background also in the Mustang GTX program and drag racing, what about Indy in the future?
There is an opportunity for us. I turned down this year $2.5 million to go kart racing. I put a team together for that, and I felt that it would that we weren't likely to have the kind of result there on short notice that we could have with the Trans Am and with the GTO series, and we're very much interested in being successful and winning races here, so we said no to that. At a point in time in the future when we would have the money and the time available for preparation, we wouldn't say no to a kart involvement or a Formula One involvement.
He hopes to become the first black race driver to make the starting field for the Indianapolis 500. Tim O'Leary has a report on the often controversial and always outspoken Willie T. Ribbs.
A lot of people say, oh, because he was so outspoken, he has a big mouth, he talked too much, that kept him out of Formula One, that kept him out of Indy cars. That is so far from the truth, it's incredible. If I was some shuffling, grinning Uncle Tom, yes sir, boss servant, I wouldn't be racing right now. People respect a man for himself. And I respect every individual for their own personality, and I expect people to respect me for that too.
Willie T. Ribbs has made a name for himself in a relatively short period of time as an outspoken, lead-footed racer. Just 29 years old, this native of San Jose, California, has already enjoyed considerable success driving the Trans Am circuit. He's won a championship in Europe, and if everything goes according to plan, he'll make his IndyCar debut this year driving for Lotus at Long Beach. Willie T. is so wound up about racing, even on a warm, sunny day at the beach, he says he can't relax. He'd rather be sweating it out in the gym training for his next ride. He's convinced strict workouts will add years to his career and give him an edge on the track.
Physically, there's nobody in better condition in racing. Mentally, just as heavy. So I think that for my age right now, genetically, I can race for another 20 years as heavy as I'm doing right now.
Ribbs considers himself a pioneer as one of the first successful black racers in the business, but he bristles at the suggestion that his color may have helped him move up through the ranks.
I think that my right foot has helped me move up as quickly as I've gotten. Black, white, Oriental, Hispanic, doesn't matter. I'm one of the fastest drivers in the world, and everybody knows it, and that's why Lotus wants me. Lotus is not signing anybody who they think can't get the car around.
Willie T. Ribbs does keep his foot on the gas, that's for sure, and the chance to do it in an Indy car is just a stone's throw away. From Santa Cruz, California, Tim O'Leary reporting for SpeedWeek.
Next up, he came with an old borrowed bike, but his privateer beat all the factory boys.
So if you want to race motorcycles outside, I guess California is the place to be.
For 9 years, the Golden State Nationals in, you probably guessed, California, have attracted some of the top names in motocross internationally, even though it's primarily a state championship dominated by Americans. Now, almost to the end of this special series, and two potential new champs. First, 250cc's. At Hollister Hills last week near San Jose, Jeff Ward took time off from his AMA responsibilities to win for his factory Kawasaki team. Jeff has been a two-time 125 champ for the Lean Green, but he'll have to go some to catch Jim Holley this time. He's almost 100 points behind with one race to go. The big bikes, 500cc's. Another familiar motocross cowboy, Goat Brecker, has owned this title recently, but he's not competing for points this year. There are two heats in each division, and in this, the second, Willie Simons on plate 48 and Pete Langley, 7F, dance for the lead. Pete's soon out of it, but Willie goes on to a second place in this moto and second overall to this man, 21-year-old Rodney Smith. He's a privateer on a 1983 Yamaha borrowed from his dad. Besides that, this is his first race in 4 months because of a knee injury. He won both heats, but no way he'll be champ. Phil Larson from Washington leads, but still needs top 10 finishes. Over $300,000 up for grabs in this series.
Monaco is back on the Formula One schedule, and there will be American TV coverage. Mark Schurer will not drive Formula One this year, but will devote most of his time to endurance racing. Raoul Boesel, who drove for Ligier in 1983, is said to be looking for an Indy ride with $250,000 in his pocket. And Parmalat will apparently not be the primary sponsor on the F1 Brabham cars this year.
IndyCar teams continue to prepare for next week's opener at Long Beach. Super V champion Arie Luyendyk was at Laguna Seca recently in the Provimi VO March. Arie is seeking Rookie of the Year honors this year. 17 are now entered in this year's Indy 500. The latest entries from Rick Gallis and Herm Johnson.
There is apparently no truth to the rumor that Rick Mears was re-injured recently. He was filming a Pennzoil commercial on the day he was supposedly injured.
Racetracks are a business. Some survive and some don't. Bob found one in the latter category while on assignment last week in Florida.
Few things are more depressing to a race fan than a racetrack that was once a thriving business but is no longer. Such is the case of the Golden Gate Speedway here in the northeastern portion of Tampa. At one time, this racetrack hosted regular Friday night races and some special events such as the Florida 200. But now, the grandstand has been disassembled, the gates are locked, and the racetrack is silent. The track was built in 1962, and for 17 years, races were held here, including the Florida 200 for late models, which was one of the biggest annual events in the Southeast. But then in 1979, Golden Gate Speedway was closed by a county noise ordinance, and although it did reopen later, it closed for good last June 8th. These pylons create an obstacle course for a truck driving school, which now uses the facility. But the property itself was sold last week, and another chapter in auto racing history in the Southeast was closed.
Here's this week's trivia question. In addition to a successful stock car career, this driver also has a win in SCCA Trans Am competition. It is A, Rusty Wallace, B, David Pearson, C, Bobby Allison, D, Tim Richmond, or E, Joe Ruttman. We'll have the answer in a moment.
Here's the answer to this week's trivia question. Back in 1967 at Riverside, California, in a Bud Moore prepared Cougar, B, David Pearson won a Trans Am race.
When photographer Greg Oldham and I were forced to leave the cold and go to Florida last week, we were told to cover any kind of racing we could find. So we did. While the Sprints and the Champ dirt cars howled on the half-mile state fairgrounds dirt nearby in search of fame and fortune, four-legged creatures squealed their way around the track with their only reward, an Oreo cookie. We talked with Bo, the winner. Is that cookie that you go for in the race that good?
Tell him, Claude.
Well, he's not too talkative, but he sure is a good racer and the winner of the pig race here in Tampa.
Well, it sounds like a bunch of hogwash to me.
Well, but for Bo, it was a very important win, Larry.
I want everybody to know that was not my story. Next week, a wrap-up on the Grand Prix at Miami. I'm Larry Newber.
And I'm Bob Jenkins. During the off-season, some NASCAR drivers got together to record a record for World Series of Country Music in Gallatin, Tennessee. And it just so happens that one of the singers won last week's Daytona 500.
I'm Dawsonville, Georgia's race driving son. My car's number 9, a running son of a gun.
SpeedWeek has been brought to you by BF Goodrich, TA High-Tech Radials. We make cars perform.
63 Fairlane got me my start, but the way the car ran, I might as well left it parked. Things got even worse in 76 with a Torino Ford that couldn't be fixed. But now things are different, the crowd's roar is heard when I pass the stands in my new Thunderbird. I'm Wild Bill Elliott, a crazy racing man. I'd like to live up to John Wayne if I can. I'm driving my best when I make them tires burn, and I still give her hell when I hit my last turn.